Who switched their lines? The shout slices through the NICU like broken glass. Alarms erupt. 5 incubators flash red at once. Not all of them. God, no, not all 5. Clara Stephen freezes beneath the bright lights, her gloved hands still dripping disinfectant. She turns, slowly, toward the incubator where a nurse is gripping a feeding tube with shaking hands. Her face pale, her voice trembling. They were fine 10 minutes ago. But the quintuplets, Annette, Emily, Yvonne, Cecile, Marie, lie impossibly still under the warm blue bulbs, their tiny chests rising in weak, stuttering breaths. Someone screams for a doctor. Someone else whispers a prayer. And in the chaos, Clara's eyes land on a discarded feeding bag hanging beneath the incubator. Clear, too clear. Her heart stops. She knows that bag. She saw it earlier in the trash. But no one saw her see it. And now every alarm in the NICU is screaming at once. The scene slows. The noise fades. Clara's breath becomes the only sound in her head. She wipes her trembling hands on her scrub top, pretending she doesn't feel the weight of every incubator watching her back. She's only a cleaning lady. People forget she exists in these rooms. But she sees everything. She saw the nutrient bags thinning long before the doctors admitted something was wrong. She noticed the weight chart stalling before anyone took the numbers seriously. She saw the way one particular nurse guarded the incubators like territory, snapping at anyone who came too close. Now the evidence is lying right there under the harsh NICU lights. A bag of liquid, so clear it looks like water. Something is happening inside the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Something no chart can explain. Something eating the life right out of 5 premature girls who never asked to fight this hard. And Clara can't look away anymore. She stares at the quintuplets, their delicate skin turning pale beneath the warm glow. 5 tiny bodies that should be gaining weight, growing stronger, fighting for life. But their limbs are thin, their faces sunken, their vitals dropping in perfect unison. It's wrong. Every instinct in Clara's body screams that it's wrong. She wipes down a monitor because that's what she's paid to do. But her eyes keep drifting to the feeding lines. They're not full, not like they're supposed to be, not like they were yesterday. And every time the suspicious nurse finishes checking them, things get worse. A voice cuts through her thoughts. You're hovering again, Clara. The nurse stands at the end of the row, arms crossed, eyes sharp, too sharp. You don't need to worry about these girls, she says with a smile that doesn't touch her eyes. I handle their feedings. Just focus on your cleaning. Clara's stomach tightens, because she's seen the way that woman locks cabinets. She's seen her hide things behind supplies. She's seen her arrive early, hours early, on days she isn't scheduled. But no one listens to a cleaning lady. Not in a hospital this big. Not over someone in scrubs and a badge. Clara just a trash bin, pretending not to shake. She knows what she saw earlier today. The nutrient bag crumpled in the janitor's closet, half drained, wrong color. She knows what she's seeing now. 5 newborns shrinking instead of growing. And she knows what she'll see tomorrow if she stays silent. But she also knows this. If she says something without proof, they'll fire her before she gets the sentence out. So instead, she stands there, staring at the incubators, whispering a promise only she can hear. I'm not letting you fade. Not on my watch. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the only person who noticed something was wrong, and no one believed you? If stories of courage and quiet bravery speak to you, stay with us. This one matters. 3 weeks earlier, Clara Stephen had stepped into the NICU with her mop bucket, believing her job would be simple. Wipe floors, empty trash, maybe offer a kind smile to tired parents passing through. She never imagined she'd one day stand between a millionaire's 5 newborn daughters and the quiet, invisible danger draining the life out of them. It all began on her first morning, when she met Frank Crawford. He stood beside the row of incubators like a man bracing against a storm. His suit looked slept in, his eyes hollow from grief and sleepless nights. He barely spoke, just placed a trembling hand against the glass where Annette lay and whispered, Olivia should have been here. The nurses kept their distance. Grief made people unpredictable. But one nurse, her, seemed to hover closer than the rest. Clara noticed her immediately. The woman moved with clip precision, guarding the incubators with a territorial stiffness that made the air feel tight. At first, Clara assumed it was dedication. Some nurses bonded fiercely with NICU babies. But the more Clara watched, the more wrong it felt. Most nurses rotated shifts like clockwork. They came, they cared, they left. Not this one. She arrived before dawn, stayed past nightfall, and she never allowed anyone, doctor or nurse, to handle the quintuplets' feedings except herself. Clara first sensed the pattern during a Tuesday morning cleanup. She was wiping a monitor when the nurse finished adjusting Cecile's line. Within minutes, Cecile's oxygen saturation dipped. A soft alarm beeped. The nurse silenced it quickly, muttering something about equipment sensitivity. But the same thing happened after she fed Emily. Anne-Marie and Annette. The dips weren't dramatic, but they were consistent, predictable. Clara kept her observations to herself until she found the feeding bags. 3 of them, stuffed deep inside a trash bin behind a linen cart. Their seals looked tampered with, creased and bulging, as if fluid had been forced out and something else forced in. Her heart pounded. She leaned closer, touching one of the bags with her glove. It shouldn't look that thin. Fortified milk had a creamy weight to it. This looked watered down. A voice cut the air behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" Clara spun around. The nurse stood there, arms crossed, lips tight. "You're getting too close to equipment you have no clearance for," she said softly. "If I see you near these lines again, I'll report you." Fear crawled up Clara's spine, but so did something stronger. Responsibility. Because she had seen enough to know something wasn't right, and no one else seemed willing to notice. Clara spent the next 2 days pretending nothing was wrong. She wiped down monitors, emptied trash bins, restocked gloves, and kept her head down, just another invisible pair of hands in the NICU. But her mind never stopped replaying the image of those feeding bags in the trash, the ones a nurse had caught her looking at. The thought gnawed at her until she couldn't ignore it anymore. If the bags were really tampered with, there had to be more, and someone had to be hiding them. One slow afternoon, when the NICU was quiet and the staff were rounding on another wing, Clara followed a hunch. Instead of rolling her cart back to the main supply room, she slipped into the small janitor's closet closest to the incubators, the one she rarely used. The light flickered to life overhead. Mop handles leaned against the wall like tired soldiers, buckets stacked on top of each other. Everything looked normal, until Clara noticed a cardboard box pushed awkwardly behind a bucket. Someone had shoved it there in a hurry. Her heartbeat thumped in her throat. She knelt and pulled the box forward. Inside were 3 feeding bags, identical to one she'd found before, except these looked even more disturbing. The first bag was barely half full, the fluid sloshing weakly against the sides. The second bag had a watery, almost translucent tint, nothing like the creamy fortified milk meant for quintuplets. The third bag's label was scratched so severely the expiration date was unreadable. Clara's hand shook as she held one to the light. The seal was loose, not torn by accident. Open, then forced close again. Someone had tampered with these. Deliberately, she swallowed hard, goosebumps rising across her arms. She needed to tell someone, anyone, so she carried one bag carefully in her gloved hand and approached the nurse on duty, a woman she trusted more than the others. "I found this in the closet," Clara whispered quietly. "Does it look normal to you?" The nurse glanced at it, eyebrow raised, then shrugged. "Probably a disposal error. Housekeeping mixes things up sometimes." But Clara didn't mix things up. She knew exactly what she'd seen. Before she could say more, a cold prickle crawled up her spine. She turned toward the hallway. The suspicious nurse was standing across the NICU, arms folded, staring directly at her. Not blinking, not moving, just watching, like she knew exactly what Clara had found. Clara tucked the bag back into the box and slid it into her cart with a steady hand. She wouldn't confront anyone yet. She couldn't, but she could start documenting everything. So she pulled a small notepad from her scrub pocket and wrote the first line. 3 tampered bags found. Someone is replacing the baby's feeds. The decline came quietly at first, numbers slipping by decimals, weight charts flattening out, subtle enough that doctors blamed prematurity and stress. But by the end of the week, no one could deny it. All 5 babies had stopped growing. Not 1, not 2, all 5. Clara stood beside the charting station, pretending to restock gloves while her eyes hovered over the printed graphs. 5 lines, 5 names, 5 identical patterns of stagnation. Annette, no gain in 8 days. Emily, down 2 ounces. Yvonne, unchanged. Cecile, oxygen dips. Marie, heart rate inconsistencies. It didn't make medical sense. Babies didn't decline in perfect synchronization, not unless something external was affecting them all at once. Clara felt a cold weight settle deep in her stomach. Later that night, as the NICU lights dimmed, she walked past Annette's incubator and stopped. Frank Crawford was there again, shoulders curled forward, forehead pressed gently to the glass. His hand trembled as he touched the incubator wall, eyes red and unfocused. "I already lost Olivia," he whispered, voice breaking a way that made Clara's throat tighten. "Please don't take them too. Please." He wasn't talking to anyone in particular. Maybe to God. Maybe to Olivia. Maybe just to the quiet hum of machines keeping his daughters alive. Clara stood in the shadows, clutching her cleaning rag. She wanted to tell him everything she'd seen. The tampered bags, the watery lines, the nurse who hovered like a guard dog around the incubators. But she had no proof. Nothing that could stand against a trained medical professional's word. A tear slid down Frank's cheek. Clara swallowed the guilt rising in her chest. The next morning, the tension snapped. She was wiping down the counters when the suspicious nurse stormed over, clipboard in hand. "I need to speak with you," she said sharply. Clara froze. "Yes, ma'am." "I filed a report," the nurse announced, loud enough for the other staff to hear. "You were seen touching restricted feeding lines yesterday. That is a direct violation of NICU protocol." Clara's heart dropped. "I never touched." "You're a cleaning worker, not a nurse," the woman hissed. "Stay in your lane." The charge nurse appeared minutes later, expression tight and controlled. "Clara," she said quietly, "one more incident like this and we'll have to let you go." Clara nodded silently, her palms sweating. She was being watched, cornered, and now officially threatened. But this only made one thing clearer. Whatever was hurting those babies, someone was desperate to hide it. The warning from the charge nurse stayed with Clara all morning, pressing on her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. She worked quietly, kept her head down, avoided the suspicious nurse at every turn. But the babies' monitors kept dipping, their tiny bodies still shrinking, and Clara felt her resolve cracking. If she didn't look for answers now, she never would. Later that afternoon, she was assigned to clean the secondary storage room, the one tucked behind the NICU, used mostly for overflow supplies. It was cluttered with boxes of gloves, disinfectant, wipes, and old equipment. Clara pushed her cart inside, intending only to sweep and wipe surfaces. She reached for a pack of cleaning wipes on the top shelf and accidentally knocked down a cardboard box behind it. The box burst open when it hit the floor. Clara froze. Inside were fresh nutrient bags, full sealed, untouched. Each tag was stamped specifically for preemies with the exact nutritional mix prescribed for Crawford quintuplets. She crouched down, lifting one bag slowly, her hands trembling. They were heavy, creamy, exactly what the babies should be receiving. But these bags, these were hidden, buried behind cleaning supplies no nurse would normally touch. Her breath caught as the truth slammed into her. The bags she'd seen on the incubators, thin, watery, pale, were not the original feeds. Someone had intentionally removed the real bags and replaced them with something diluted. Clara staggered back, pressing a hand over her mouth to keep from sobbing. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't incompetence. This was sabotage. The babies were being starved on purpose. Her legs gave out, and she slid down the wall into a sitting position, pulling her knees close. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered into the dim room. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." She didn't know if Olivia could hear her, if spirits stayed close to the ones they love. but the thought of the late mother watching her daughters suffer was unbearable. Clara wiped her face with the sleeve of her scrub top. The storage room felt colder now, the fluorescent light harsher. She looked at the stash again, proof that someone was manipulating the quintuplets' care. For the first time since she started this job, Clara felt truly afraid, not for herself, for those 5 little girls fighting for every breath. Before we continue, let me say this. If your heart aches with Clara right now, if you've ever felt powerless watching someone innocent suffer, then let your support be a voice for people like her. These stories only matter because you choose to hear them. Night in the NICU was always quieter, softer, machines humming in steady rhythms, the glow of incubator lights casting blue halos across the floor. But on this night, something felt wrong the moment Clara stepped into the hallway after her break. A thin, wavering alarm echoed from Marie's station. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft warning, like a whisper begging someone to look closer. Clara hurried toward the sound, but when she reached the edge of the NICU, she stopped so abruptly her breath caught in her throat. The suspicious nurse stood bent over Marie's incubator, her hands moving with frantic precision. She wasn't adjusting blankets. She wasn't checking vitals. She was gripping the nutrient line, unhooking it, and replacing it with a fresh bag, except the bag wasn't fresh. It was clear as water. Clara's pulse thudded in her ears. She stepped closer, hidden behind a rolling chart, heart pounding so hard she thought it might give her away. The nurse lifted another line, this time Cecile's, and drained fluid into a disposal cup before attaching another clear bag. The tubes sagged half empty, their contents far too thin to sustain a premature infant. Clara stared at the incubators. 5 tiny chests rising, falling, struggling. Their breaths were weak, their limbs limp, their bodies shrinking while machines lied with soft beeps that suggested everything was fine. This wasn't incompetence. This was intentional. Clara clutched her cart for balance, her vision blurring with horror. She knew without a doubt that these diluted bags matched the ones she found hidden in the closet, and the nurse was switching them out in the middle of the night when fewer eyes could see. Marie's monitor flickered with a brief, soft alarm. The nurse's jaw tightened. "Shoo!" she whispered to the baby, though the words sounded nothing like comfort. She silenced the alarm without checking the girl's vitals, then kept working. Clara's foot accidentally nudged the wheel of her cart. The small squeak echoed too loud in the silence. The nurse whipped her head around, eyes narrowing, her face twisted into something cold, something dangerous, as her gaze locked on the shadow where Clara stood. Slowly, she stepped away from the incubator and approached. "You didn't see anything," she whispered, voice low and venomous. Clara's breath stuttered. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think, could only hear the pounding of her heart and the soft beeping of machines slowly betraying 5 newborns. Then instinct kicked in. Clara turned and ran, down the hallway, past the supply room, past the vending machine, until she reached the elevator and pressed a button with shaking fingers. She didn't stop trembling even when the doors closed. But she knew one thing for certain now. The babies weren't failing on their own. Someone was making sure they didn't survive. The hospital was nearly silent when Clara made her move. Midnight air pressed heavy against her chest as she slipped through the dim corridor, clutching the stolen badge she'd found dangling from a nurse's coat hook. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her heartbeat drummed so loud she feared the walls themselves could hear it. The surveillance room sat at the far end of the hall, a glowing rectangle of screens behind a glass door marked authorized personnel only. Clara hesitated, her reflection pale and trembling in the window. She thought of the babies, their shallow breaths, their fragile ribs barely lifting beneath the lights, and swiped the badge. A quiet click. The door opened. Rows of monitors flickered, each showing different corners of the NICU. Clara stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Her fingers shook as she reached for the keyboard, scrolling through camera logs one by one. There, the suspicious nurse, entering the restricted storage room at 2:17 a.m., again at 3:42, and again the next night. On the grainy screen, Clara watched her switch feeding bags, move quickly, always glancing over her shoulder. The woman's calm precision made Clara's stomach twist. It wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was a pattern, deliberate and methodical. She fast-forwarded through more footage. The nurse leaving the NICU with small containers tucked beneath her arm, returning minutes later with fresh bags that glistened too clear under fluorescent light. Clara's throat burned. Every click of the mouse felt heavier, like she was dragging the weight of 5 tiny lives with it. She found a flash drive in a drawer and slid it into the computer. The download bar crept slowly across the screen. Seconds felt like hours. Then, the doorknob turned. Clara froze, heart hammering. The door opened with a soft creak, and she braced for the nurse's voice. But it wasn't her. It was Frank Crawford. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit rumpled, grief carved deep into his face. The monitors dropped again, he muttered, stepping inside. They said the girls are slipping. He stopped when he saw the screens. The footage. Clara's tears. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was a faint hum of the machines. Frank's voice cracked into a whisper. Tell me what you found. Clara's breath broke. The dam she'd held for weeks finally gave way. She told him everything. Frank didn't wait for permission. The double doors of the NICU burst open, his footsteps echoing to the sterile hallway like thunder. Clara followed close behind, clutching the flash drive in her trembling hand. The night shift nurses froze mid-motion, startled by the sudden chaos breaking through the usual calm. Frank's voice cut through the air, hoarse, raw, and shaking with fury. Open that cabinet. No one moved. The suspicious nurse, pale and rigid, stepped forward with practiced calm. Mr. Crawford, please. This is a sterile. He didn't let her finish. He yanked the cabinet handle and flung the doors wide. Rows of clear, diluted bags stared back at them, their thin liquid catching the fluorescent light. They looked wrong, too colorless, too clean, too empty of life. For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Then Clara stepped forward, inserting the flash drive into the nurse station computer. Watch, she whispered. The monitors flickered to life, grainy footage filling the screen. The suspicious nurse appeared on video, entering storage rooms, switching bags, replacing real nutrient feeds with fakes. Her movements were deliberate, precise, damning. Gasps rippled through the room. One nurse covered her mouth. Another backed away in disbelief. The woman in question stumbled backward, her mask of control cracking. That's not me, she snapped, voice trembling. That footage, it's doctored. Clara's voice rose, trembling but clear. It's been happening for weeks. You did this. The nurse's composure shattered. She screamed, voice breaking into incoherent denial as she lunged toward the computer, tried to yank the flash drive free. But Frank stepped between them, his eyes burning with grief and rage. Those are my daughters, he said quietly. You tried to kill my daughters. Security arrived seconds later, drawn by the noise. The nurse fought, then collapsed in sobs as they restrained her, her screams echoing down the hall until they faded beyond the closing doors. Silence returned, heavy, sacred. Frank sank to his knees beside the incubators. His hands trembled as he reached for the glass, eyes blurring with tears. Please, he whispered. Please let it not be too late. Doctors rushed to replace the fake bags with real nutrient lines. The machines beeped, then steadied. The color slowly returned to babies' faces, their tiny chests rising stronger with each breath. For the first time in weeks, the monitors sang, not warnings but hope. Clara stood beside Frank, her hand resting on his shoulder, as the rhythm of life returned to the room. Days passed, and the NICU began to sound different. The beeping no longer carried panic. It pulsed with life, steady and sure. The quintuplets were finally gaining weight. Their skin, once pale and fragile, now held a soft pink glow. Nurses whispered in relief as they logged the numbers. Ounces turning into pounds, breaths deepening, hearts growing stronger. Doctors gathered around the incubators, faces a mixture of awe and guilt. The truth had come out. The girls had been systematically starved through diluted feeds, an atrocity hidden in plain sight. Yet they had survived. Barely, but beautifully. Frank stood beside the glass, his reflection blurred by tears. You saved them, he said quietly. Clara shook her head. I just did what anyone would have done. He turned to her, voice breaking. No, everyone saw the signs, but only you acted. You're the reason my girls are still alive. The hospital board launched a full investigation within hours. Policies were rewritten. Security tightened. The nurse was charged, and the story of the Hopkins quintuplet miracle spread far beyond the hospital walls. When the chaos settled, the chief administrator called Clara into his office. He spoke with gratitude, then handed her a letter, an official commendation for bravery, and an offer for a permanent, higher-paying position in the NICU. Clara accepted through tears. But the moment that stayed with her most wasn't about promotions or praise. It was the morning Frank visited with all 5 babies finally stable, each swaddled in soft pink blankets. He placed a small handprint card on her cleaning cart. 5 tiny prints in blue ink. They already know your voice, he said. If you're willing, I'd like you to stay in their lives. They trust you, and so do I. Clara's throat tightened. She looked at the tiny girls, blinking up at her through the incubator lights, and smiled. I'd be honored. The NICU felt warmer now. Hope lingered in every corner. The hum of machines, the soft coos, the quiet rhythm of healing. As the monitors beeped steadily and the babies slept soundly, Clara stood by their side, her heart full. If this journey touched you, if Clara's courage reminded you that ordinary people can save lives, then let your support be a quiet promise to keep listening to stories that matter. Because sometimes heroes don't wear badges or stethoscopes. Sometimes they carry cleaning carts and hearts that refuse to look away.